makes financial sense? Perhaps. Again, speak with someone who knows you and your specific situation. Also, certainly a realtor or someone in the real estate industry that's knowledgeable about the market you're looking at is very helpful as well. But I'll talk a bit more about kind of the whys on the housing side, kind of what's going on here. And that is, as I've spoken about before, and this has been backed by economic data from a number of sources at this point. Most Americans were not meaningfully financially impacted by COVID and the shutdowns. Let that sink in for a moment, okay? The majority of Americans were not, significantly financially impacted by COVID or the shutdowns. They were affected in a lot of other ways, certainly, but they weren't. In addition to that, those who were given a tremendous amount of stimulus from the government. Now, I understand that people that were not affected also got stimulus checks, and I also know that not everybody got support. Okay, so I'm aware of that too. I'm going with majority data here for the purpose of an economic presentation. So what happens when the stock market did well, when you're still employed, and you have a lot of free time? People really started to think where they want to live. What kind of house do they want to be in? There was a significant outflow out of the large urban centers into more of the suburbs and even into more rural areas. Land, especially in high demand areas, is being snapped up like crazy. It is not speculators that are snapping up this land, okay? It is not people that don't have the money and are leveraging or taking crazy bets. These are people that want space around them. They want some elbow room. They want the ability to either now or sometime in the future have land, be out of a more dense environment. And it may not be for every day. They still may keep their place in the city, but they also want space out. And these are sometimes pretty far-flung areas. It's fascinating to see the migration data around the United States. Fascinating. And there's largely an impact of people having money, people having time, people reconsidering, reevaluating life. There is, of course, a financial component. There are lower cost of living areas and higher cost of living areas. There's a tax component. All of these things are also seen on an individual level, but this is driving the housing prices, especially out of the dense urban areas. The biggest outflows have been from the major cities. I think number 1, New York, number 2, San Francisco, number 3, DC. This data is a little older now, so this, of course, may be fluctuating, but the large, dense urban centers across the country are seeing the outflow, which is bringing in the inflow, which kind of comes to one of the questions I got, which is if everybody's leaving California, as the media says, right, then why are housing prices so high? It's not leaving the state necessarily, it's about moving around the state. And yes, California on all of our migration data has had significant outflows of people living here. However, the thing with California is that before the pandemic, we were so far behind in our construction and building based on the demand, based on our population. We were behind it even before the demands increased and people started moving around. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money to get California even close to the rate, even at a stable population, of enough housing for the demand. It's simply that. And it's very hard to track exact migration data. We use a lot of data sources, but it's not specific. It's not as clean as things like employment data and things like that. Over time, you'll get a better sense of this. I can speak for myself in doing financial planning is many, many people have plans to move as part of their financial and life plan, but they're not ready yet, right? They're going to be where their parents are, where their kids are, where their jobs are. So future planning is not necessarily today planning. The pandemic pulled forward a tremendous amount of demand in the real estate sector. Now the challenge is also this. As costs are increasing, the cost of labor and the cost of materials are increasing rapidly, it is very, very expensive to build a home. Right now, what we're seeing is home builders are pulling back. You would think in this type of market that the home builders would be like building houses as fast as they can. It's making less and less and less financial sense to build. When the cost of materials are skyrocketing and the cost of labor is skyrocketing, and that's if you can even get the labor. Nothing worse than being half built and you can't finish it, right? These challenges are making it harder to build a house and still make a profit. So it's causing the builders to pull back, which is increasing the supply-demand imbalance. And so this is expected. We are seeing slowing in this space. We are seeing slowing in the housing sector. This is a good and healthy thing. At some point, the Fed is going to slow down their purchases of mortgage-backed securities, which will start to have mortgage interest rates rise, which of course will make housing less affordable. These are all the reasons when getting very specific and customized guidance is so important in real estate, or any type of planning, especially major planning like that. This is going to continue on. There is no expectation, no realistic expectation at this point of any type of crash in housing, because the demand supply ratio and the fact that this is not as speculative as it is the money is there. Whether it's being financed at very, very low rates or it's being bought with cash, it's backed by money. People are very unlikely to walk away from an asset that they put 20% down on or more. They're very unlikely to walk away from an asset that's appreciating in value. It is not the same as 2008. So my apologies to all of you that are really trying to buy in these markets, because it is completely crazy. And if it's very important to do so, again, work with somebody that can guide you. There are many different ways of purchasing a house and funding a house and doing that are widely known and understood. So this is why it's very important to speak with someone specifically on this, because there are 3 or 4 questions about how can I or my children buy a house in this market with that. Let's see, I'll come back to some parts of this in a moment. Don't forget the questions. If you have questions, send them over. I have all the ones that have already been sent so far. So don't hesitate to put additional questions in. And again, thank you for everybody saying them in advance. Unemployment labor market, lots of interest in this area as well. As things begin to reopen, okay, as we begin to quote unquote get back to normal, the labor markets will slowly improve. Why I say slowly is that some interesting things happened during this time. One of which is a lot of companies figured out how to do more with less people, okay? They had limits on how many people could be in the workplace. And so they rapidly worked on, if I want to stay in business. At first it was if I want to stay in business. Then it became, hey, if I want to grow, as this thing's open up, it was a shift. Companies are trying to figure out how to do more with less people. This has actually been going on for a while pre-pandemic, but it really accelerated during that. The use of technology, the use of automation has really accelerated within companies, less reliance on people. Now, the bad news is less jobs available. The good news is the jobs that will be available will likely be higher wage jobs going forward. I could talk a bit more about that. So unemployment numbers are going to come up slowly. One big thing that needs to phase out to really get that going is the extended unemployment. For people, especially people at the lower end of the wage scale, with the extended unemployment, it was more financially beneficial to stay home and not go back to work full time, or work a certain number of hours but not work full time. And this was very clearly understood, and this has been a struggle for many businesses, especially like restaurants and companies like that, to bring people back to work because it doesn't make financial sense for them. A number of states across the country have actually just stopped the program because of the effects it was having on businesses and on their local and their economies. Other states have not. It's supposed to expire in September. California is a little bit of an exception here. They might want to extend it longer. That is one of the things that was in Newsom's proposals. I'm not sure how the business community is reacting to that. I did see the Chamber of Commerce's reaction. It was not positive. So I'm not sure if that's going to go through or not, but it is a challenge. I have clients that own restaurants, and they just saying they literally, as people are coming back and they want to eat out, they should be so excited about that, to be opened up again, but the challenge is getting workers. Now, I want to make sure I'm not coming across as everyone's just staying home to get the check. Schools, the vast majority of schools are not open full time, and now most of them are graduated, so I should say a couple of weeks ago. Vast majority of schools in California, public schools, are not open full time. Okay, it's kind of random how they're doing it. Oh, we're going to try this, we're going to try that, we're going to try this. Well, that makes it really hard if you're a parent to go back to work. Really hard. You just don't know if your child is going to be in school, if they're not going to be in school, are they going to be virtually learning? You need to be flexible, you need to be available, and not a lot of employers can allow for that. And that makes it, challenging again for a parent or parents to go back to work. In addition, there are still people that are concerned about not the vaccine. Sorry, yes, there's those people as well. There are people that are concerned about COVID. Maybe perhaps have a very vulnerable family member who cannot get vaccinated, and they're going to be cautious going back. That is something that, can be a legitimate concern, also can be a reason not to go back to work, but it's something that will likely, phase away over time, but it is definitely a consideration. And another one is people have gotten used to not being in the office. And this is a challenge for a lot of companies. And I will tell you, as a CEO belonging to CEO groups and talking with other companies, large and small, about what the expectation is going back. It's a challenge. Some businesses, people have to be in a place. Those are largely the businesses that didn't close. They need to be in a defined workplace. Other businesses, there's can be a degree of flexibility. Most likely going forward, there's going to be certain industries will require people to be back in the offices. They're already remodeling and adjusting for that. People are coming back. Like it or not, they're coming back. Others will have more of a flexible work environment. There'll be times when everybody's in the office or in the workplace location. It's not always offices. And there'll be times when people can work remotely. That degree of flexibility, we've learned as businesses, organizations, that we can do this. We've also learned that sometimes it's really fun to all be back in the office together. I can speak for Sequoia. We're going to keep a flexible work environment going forward. I was in the office in San Jose yesterday with a bunch of people, and it was fun. We're everyone on the team is vaccinated, and it was just kind of nice being together and talking to one another. So just a little personal aside on that. There's advantages of each one, and companies are trying to figure this out. Of course, Cal OSHA hasn't finalized a lot of the information there, which could have impacts on this, but they're bringing people back to work when there's flexibility will help with people who have childcare issues around, especially around school, people who have concerns about the virus, who cannot get vaccinated. It will allow that flexibility for companies who can do it. So I want to bring this up, is that this is a moving target, and that's why those unemployment numbers are not going to go up as quickly as our return to quote unquote normalcy. I'll get some more questions about that, so I'll answer them just a second here. Let's see. I'm kind of hopping over here to the supply chain. It's kind of like, this is a question that's come up a lot in my conversations with clients, is everything, well, and it literally almost seems like everything is either rising in cost or is not readily available. And it's really weird things that you don't really think about. So much like the toilet paper shortage that we had early in the pandemic, now just about everything else. And it's really a combination of issues, but the biggest one of all is you cannot shut the economy down completely and then reopen it like it's a light switch. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. When you shut down all the gears of the machine, domestically and internationally, it takes a while for things to pull back. And our demand for things didn't go away. It just shifted to things we could actually do. Either we felt safe doing or we were allowed to do. As things open up, that pent-up demand to do things like traveling and visiting with friends and getting together in movie theaters and concerts and the like, that's only going to increase. But even not every single thing that was shut down, every single thing that's opening, it takes time to readapt. And so also we have, and this is always ongoing, but it was just exacerbated by all of this. When a meat packing plant can only have so many people, on an assembly line, they can only produce so much meat. Everybody wants to barbecue a hot dog on Memorial Day. There's not enough hot dogs. It's just a reality because of the COVID restrictions, right? So the cost goes up and they become more scarce. Another thing is we've had weather events. Normally, this is somewhat adaptable, but with a combination of the disruptions in the supply chain, the weather events in Texas actually were interesting because petrochemicals are in virtually everything that we use. Like a large amount of things we use. So it was a weird things like house siding became scarce, right? Which just what we need, more construction materials that are expensive or scarce, right? But that was an effect of the weather. Weather also affected the prices of corn and the availability of corn. So all of these things are always happening, but the adaptability is limited because the supply chain has been disrupted so heavily. There are not enough truck drivers to be able to drive the trucks. There simply is not. Containers, even when the ships arrive, are sitting at the ports for much longer, stacked much higher than they have been in the past. The demand is there, but the supply chain inefficiencies means it's taking longer to get goods, whether it's the raw materials to build things or the completed and finished good. This is expected to go on probably until the Christmas season, until the holiday season. Some areas will recover more quickly than others, but it's going to take time and it's going to be random. So there'll be something that's not an issue and all of a sudden it becomes scarce. What are companies doing? So we'll get in a little bit in the investment side of it. Companies have seen the opportunity here. The just-in-time manufacturing, the just-in-time supply chain is changing over to the just-in-case supply chain. So think about that for a moment. We used to be, the most efficient, effective way to do it is to produce exactly what you need and get exactly where it's supposed to be, exactly when it's needed by the end user or the customer. And that created efficiencies, and technology helped to allow for that, and less inventories, and it was good for companies, and it's good for companies' bottom line. Then you have disruptions. The disruptions of COVID was constantly disruptions because the supply demand kept getting knocked one direction or the other depending where we were in the cycle and what was happening overseas. So now companies are using technology, are using the infrastructure to create more of a just in case, which will keep them more nimble and more adjustable for challenges to the supply chain in the future. The companies that are doing that are the ones I'm investing in. They're not all doing it, but there's a lot of them that are figuring it out. And that's going to make a big difference in the future when and if we have another situation, whether it's weather, okay, and we can have a whole conversation about the changing weather, right? It's a real issue, and it's definitely going to have impacts, especially going forward. Whether it's the fallout from the pandemic or any other event in the future, the supply chain needs to be more adjustable, more adaptable. Intel is spending, I think, $2 billion or so building chip plants here in the US, because they don't want to ever be stuck where they were stuck now with the shortage in semiconductors. I think GM is partnering up with, I believe, LG, creating a battery plant here in the United States. They're spending, a couple $1 billion on that. Companies are looking to bring it back to the US. So I hope I don't offend anybody with my little joke here. As I say, there's a lot of ways to bring it back to the US. Donald Trump wanted to, make America first, bring it all back to the US. And look, it's happening, even though he's not the president anymore. It's happening because companies want more control over their supply chains where they can get it because of that, again, those disruptions. I'm speaking about this one a bit more because I'm going to bring this into the economic aspect of it. I have done and continue to do very in-depth analysis on the companies we hold in our portfolios to see how they're positioned for this. Are they going to be impacted? Are their revenues going to be impacted? Are they structurally going to change? If they're going to structurally change, who else could potentially benefit from it? It's a whole different way of doing portfolio analysis and research, but this affects just about every industry out there. And adaptability is going to be key going forward. Adaptability is truly going to be key. And it's not an easy thing to say by revenues. I talked before about the zombie companies and companies that look great on paper, but they have a ton of debt. And when interest rates start to rise, they're going to be in some serious trouble. Another layer of the companies that can be in trouble are companies that are not adapting. They're doing well now on momentum, but they're not adapting for change. And those will not do well going forward. As you see the markets right now, they're kind of going through an inflection period. As I talked about before, we're in the digestion period. This is a nice, healthy time to be in, very healthy time to be in. We had a great run up over the last year, and now we're in the digestion phase. We'll have big ups, we'll have big downs, it's digestion phase. What are the markets watching right now? Well, politics again. Yes, politics. What is going to happen with Biden's infrastructure plan? I'm sorry, I'm not going to get this name right, but the one behind it is the Families First plan, but more focused on family social issues and other programs he wants to put in place. But the big whopper is his tax plan. He really, really, really wants to find a way to pay for all the things that he really, really, really wants to get done. And the tax plan is the way of doing it. I want to stress that it's really, really important for those who are curious to actually read through the entire proposal and not just listen to the headlines. I've done that because it's my job. And you can always ask me, of course. The reason is that there's a lot of headline things, for example, not raising taxes on people making less than $400,000 a year, or couples, making less than $500,000. A lot of those things are not fully accurate. They're more talking points or press points. I am not here to take a position on whether he's a good president or a bad president, or it's a good policy or a bad policy. What I'm saying is you want to be prepared for what actually passes, and adjust your financial plan accordingly, because there are a lot of changes in this. This is a pretty meaty and pretty robust, a pretty significant potential tax reform if it goes through as written. The reason I'm not spending a lot of time on the details of it is that it hasn't gone through. And there's likely going to be a lot of revisions and a lot of changes, and I don't want people to worry prematurely. I did get a question, this is a really important one, is that Biden's saying he wants to make it retroactive. He's saying that, we'll see if it gets done. There's really nothing you can do. So to explain what that means, it means is that the tax policy would take effect at the beginning of the year. So basically, it limits your ability to adjust and change and plan and strategize around that. The later we get in the year, the harder that's going to be to pull off. And again, it's talking points of politicians are not actually what happens in policy. So the person asking this question, please don't worry prematurely about this, because again, there's not much that can be done until we know what the plan will have in it. But there are a lot of factors, especially for those who want to pass assets on to your children. That is a big whopper, whether it's the family home, whether it's the business, whether it's other things. There's a lot to be considered there. So keep in very, very close contact with your professionals that you work with. If you don't have, a solid planning team, and again, I'm more than happy to talk to you. If I'm not the right fit, reach out and find someone, because you're going to want to be on top of these things. They could really, really impact nearly all of our clients' financial plans, if, again, depending how they pass. In addition, all right, I'm going to spend a minute talking about California. So California has roughly 100 billion, yes, with a B, we're getting used to these big numbers now, I'm sure, in excess revenues. Okay, I believe, and I'm going to probably rough on these numbers, around 76 or so was tax collection, revenue coming into the state, and the remaining is, on top of that, the federal government still gave them 12 billion more. So it kind of shows a lot of how this spraying money with a fire hose on a federal level was not really efficiently or wisely done, which I talked about that last time. It wasn't, and so now California is awash in money. And a governor who is facing a recall, a potential of a recall. That being said, the money is getting put into just about everything right now, or at least proposed to get put into just about everything right now. I want to bring this up to Californians. Now, this may not all happen, because a big part of the thing that may slow this down is there's some rule in, I guess, the California Constitution that if the state brings in a certain amount of excess revenue, they actually have to return it to the taxpayers. Yeah, I don't know if we should hold our breath for that or not, but I guess it is a rule. So this is probably going to be, there's probably going to be a fight about where that money's spent or where that money goes. But these are the proposals to date is, pretty much everything that you can imagine. The concern I have, and why I'm bringing this up to be aware of, this is awareness, not anything, again, to worry about yet, is that many of the proposals are not one time. Anyone who's been in California for any length of time knows that California's boom and bust. When the revenue comes in, California has a lot of excess, they're flush. And when the revenue doesn't come in, it's primarily wealthier taxpayers that are funding the state. A recession hits, anything happens, and that dries up. California often really struggles, if not goes into a deficit, right? The reason I bring this up is because a lot of these funding that Governor Newsom's talking about is long-term. It's not one and done. It's not, hey, we got extra money, let's put some in the rainy day fund, right? And some of it we're going to spend, and we're going to really get money where it needs to get in California. So a lot of this is ongoing. So what happens when California runs into its next slowdown or slow period, when the revenue's not there, is where does the state get the money to continue these programs? Most likely it's going to be from the taxpayers, because it's very hard to go to people and say, for an example, housing and things like that. Well, how can you really take that away from people? It is something to be very mindful of. It is something to be very watchful of. I'm bringing this up why it fits in the new normal. It all comes with the planning. The new normal is the governments have learned two things. And I'll tell in orders of importance. Number one, most important thing, voters love checks. Doesn't matter what side of the aisle they're on, voters love checks. It is really, really hard to take stuff away from people when you start to give it to them. Whether it's a tax cut or it's a stimulus check. It is really, really hard to do that. But politicians have learned that this works, and they will spend, and they will make it very clear that they're spending, to appease various groups of people. This is not saying that this money's not needed. It is not saying that these services aren't needed, housing's not needed. These things are needed. The challenge is the revenue volatility and how that's going to be managed going forward. Why does it bring us up? You're saying, well, Christine, you're an economist. Why are you talking about this? Because it has an economic impact. It has a significant planning and economic impact on a state level as well as an individual level. So you want to be aware of this. You want to be able to adapt to this. As you probably know for now, I'm an optimistic person by nature, and almost everything can be solved by proper planning. Proper planning is not reactive, it's proactive, but it's not from a place of fear. It's from a place of awareness, right? So that's the way of seeing it. I bring this up too because there was a lot of questions on this. So I thought if I kind of encapsulated it in this way, I would be able to share it. All right, final thing I'm going to do, and then I'm going to go into the questions, was a little bit, and I guess it was just sort of a little bit here, the questions that came around COVID, and when the economy is going to open up and when the states are going to open up. And I think the question is COVID related, but it's also economic related, so I'll kind of touch upon the more economic side of it, which is, I guess, let me ask the question, maybe that would even be simpler. It says, what is the number of people that must be vaccinated for things to fully reopen? Okay, so that's how the question came across. From an economic perception, there are two pieces to this puzzle, okay? One is when things can open because states release their restrictions, okay? So for an example, there are only 3 states left in the United States that require masks in all situations, only 3, California being one of them. California is supposed to open, I think, next week or so. They're supposed to fully reopen. As many of you know, I spent time working in our Nevada office. Nevada is open, so there's no mask requirements. Actually, sorry, I misspoke. Unvaccinated people are supposed to wear masks. Vaccinated people do not need to wear masks. And that's, some states are that way, and the rest of the country is open. So 3 states still require masks. 3 states still have the restrictions. I'm not sure about Massachusetts and New Jersey, but I'm sure at some point they're going to release their restrictions, as California is, again, about a week or so. So I bring this up because of sometimes our perceptions are a little bit where we live and not necessarily what's happening in the rest of the country. But because states have been open, and some for quite a long time, we're able to actually track economic data on what we call open and closed states. Okay, so we'll take Florida for an example, who's been open, pretty much entirely open for some time now. We can look at their unemployment numbers are almost half what California's are, right? I mean, they're open, people are working. We can look at their economic data of spending, consumer spending, and anticipated state revenues. We can look at where people traveled over the Memorial weekend. Travel was up 500%. People traveled, people went around. I don't have all the data yet, so what I've seen, I can pretty much tell you people went to the states that were the most open, right? They want to go out and they want to do things. So those are rules, those are restrictions, those are things that you can't do. The other side of the ledger, okay, economically, so that's like you can't do certain things because the government will not allow you to in this location. The other side of the ledger is people's feeling of safety doing those things, okay? Whether they're vaccinated or unvaccinated, what is their safety feeling of doing this? So there was a great and fascinating survey done that a lot of us economists looked at, and it showed basically polled vaccinated and unvaccinated people. And they asked them, what is your comfort level doing these various level activities? Everything from going to a restaurant with your friends, going to a concert, getting on an airplane. I forgot all the questions, but that. And it was fascinating because across the board, even though there was some things like going to a concert had the least number of people that were comfortable, going to a restaurant with your friends had the most people, right? What was fascinating is the unvaccinated people as a collective were more confident than the vaccinated people. Okay? Now, people could say, well, they don't care, that's why they're not vaccinated. This was taken at a time when this poll was taken at a time when not everybody could get vaccinated. Okay? So it's interesting to see that even though the people are vaccinated, they're still cautious. Okay? Now, again, very general information. Why are they cautious? Perhaps they live with someone who cannot get vaccinated, who has pre-existing or high-risk conditions, health conditions. Perhaps a lot of things. You don't know why. But the important part that I took away from that, again, economically, is just because you open up and just because people get vaccinated doesn't mean they're going back to the way things were anytime soon. The cautious among us are going to wait. Okay, they're going to wait. Just as the vaccine cautious, people who are concerned about getting the vaccine, they're going to wait as well. So there's going to be a period of time from when the opening or the grand opening, everybody's open, passes to when people come back and do things as they always did before. All right, that's it. And that's just around the vaccine. I spoke earlier about the other issues, childcare, about what your workplace requires. Can you work from home? Can you work remotely? Are your kids in school, or are they, again, learning remotely? All the things that won't be known until over time. But economically, there's going to be two waves. The one wave is all the people are going out, yeah, we can do it. We're getting on a plane. We're going to Disneyland. We're doing all this stuff. We're spending like crazy, and we're making up for lost time, gosh darn it. And another group of people are like, you know what? There's variants out there. This could happen. That could happen. I don't know. The only X% is vaccinated, so I'm not going out there. Maybe they're really not vaccinated and they're still not wearing a mask. All the fear will still be there, and those people will move a little more slowly, and when they get there, right? So that's the important part from an economic perspective, is there's what you can do, and there's also what people are willing to do. However, even if you're not going out to a concert, doesn't mean that you're not spending money, and doesn't mean that the economy's not picking up. It's just a little bit differently. Expectation is that we're going to have a big burst through this year, and things will start to moderate as we get into next year, as people got a lot of that out of your system. Beyond that, it's going to depend how the overall economy is doing, which, as I've mentioned before, know what you own in your portfolio, because a lot of things are going to drop off pretty quickly as we continue to reopen that have done very well over the last year. So be very aware of that as well. Now I'll get back to my whole planning lecture again, but do know what you own in the portfolio. So I'm going to go through the questions here. Just quickly, if there's any I didn't touch. Again, if anyone else wants to add anything, please feel free to send me a message. Keeping up on the email as well. And these are questions from people that could not attend the webinar today, I believe. Maybe you were able to attend, so I want to make sure to answer them. So for anybody that's watching the recording later and doesn't want to hear me talk about the rest of the stuff, questions are being answered at the 36-minute mark. So here we go. I think I answered this one. What is the number of people that must be vaccinated to reopen? I think states are really making their decisions based on a lot of data, not really the vaccination rates per se. Again, all states are open in some form or another except 3, and California's already said they're reopening middle of June. So I don't think there's an actual vaccination rate. Something to keep in mind, though, I should add, because of my in-laws coming to visit and picking them up and taking them to the airport, I went to LAX airport 3 times in a month-and-a-half period of time. I didn't get on a plane. I was just dropping people off and picking them up. And I will tell you that the international terminal was packed. This was back in February, March. Packed full of people coming and going all over the world. So what our vaccination rates are in the United States is we're not in a little bubble. People are coming and going. That's one airport, one international airport, and one terminal. That doesn't account for people coming across our borders in all sorts of different ways, and people, connecting and visiting people. So we're not ever going to be in a little bubble where a certain vaccination rate in the US is going to give us the green light, what they call the herd mentality, or kind of concept, right? Or herd immunity, not herd mentality. Maybe it's a bit of both. But consider that on the economic front is that I don't think there's an exact number in which the fear will be gone or everything's going to completely reopen. At least that's not what we're seeing at this point. The long-term economic effects of COVID and policies around COVID on the economy. I think I talked about that fairly well in this. There will be, I think, more caution, especially around cold and flu season. You probably see more people, maybe avoiding crowded environments during the winter months. People perhaps wearing masks even where not required. There will be more caution. It could have an economic impact if enough people didn't do an activity. Only time will tell. The highest probably at this point, barring a variant that comes out that is completely immune to the vaccine, something really happening where we kind of go back where we were, it's probably going to be less and less people over time. As more time goes on, more people will become confident. But I could very well see a slowdown in activities as we move into cold and flu season, because that's a time where the virus potentially could pop up again, and or people will just be overall more cautious. I use 9/11 as a great reference point here. There was a lot of caution around a lot of things for a long time because that unthinkable event happened on our shores, and very much the same thing with COVID. There's gonna be, when you're in an elevator and someone coughs, it could be 3 years later, you're gonna be like, that nervousness is gonna be there for some time. That behavioral change is gonna be there for some time. I see it now, even with vaccinated people getting together, or myself or somebody else. We used to just hug each other. Now we ask permission first, right? You just that one, just to make sure everybody's okay with it before doing it. That'll probably take longer. The economic impact of it is, the biggest thing is going to be the deficit, the debt levels that the U.S. government has run up to fund this. The last stimulus that was done earlier this year was not necessary economically. I have to stress that. Economically, it was completely unnecessary. It was politically necessary. It was not economically necessary. Okay, and I'm being very generalist in what I'm saying, very generalist. There's certainly people that needed it, that benefited from it, but overall, collectively in our economy, that ran up our debt even higher, and it wasn't essential, broad U.S. economy. Again, I don't want to take away from the fact that there are people who really needed it to get or got things that they needed. But this is making the U.S. less adaptable to future crises, because there's only so much debt that we can carry as a nation before we start having serious structural problems. And structural problems that are a whole nother webinar, a whole nother conversation, but they're very meaningful. Nobody knows what that number is, but the higher you stack the chips, the sooner they're eventually going to fall. So we have to be mindful of that. So that actually truly is the greatest economic impact of COVID, is the massively high deficit. And how are we going to navigate that as a country going forward? Let's see. Not economic, but curious. Why do people wear masks who are vaccinated? Okay. Yeah, you're right. It's not economic. I think I answered that one. I don't even know I asked this question. I think I answered that question actually in different levels of caution. There are people that tend to see things more optimistically or have lower levels of fear in almost any activities in life. And there tend to be people that are more pessimistic and have higher levels of fear as personality types. In addition, people are around people that are at higher risk that cannot get vaccinated, or maybe that won't get vaccinated. There's a lot of reasons for it. And all I can say on that is, don't try not to be judgmental. And I'm not saying that to be judgmental of the person who wrote this question. Allow people to do what's right for them, and you do what's right for yourself within the guidelines or boundaries, whatever the rules that are in place. It's a simple, most peaceful way to do it, because you can't know what someone's thinking. And I would imagine that, let me actually, if I may, tell a very fast story on that one. So I was in Nevada, working in Nevada last week, and I went to Costco in Carson City to pick some things up, actually some snacks for the office. And when I got to Costco, I saw lots of people going in that were wearing masks. And I'm like, does Costco have a different policy? Because businesses can have a different policy than the state. And I didn't bring a mask. So I was thinking maybe I couldn't go in. But I went up front and I asked the person, I said, am I required to wear a mask here? And they said, no. And I said, yeah, I'm asking because so many people are wearing masks. And he said, that's all the Californians coming down from the lake. The lake meaning Lake Tahoe. So that was a place, that's a Costco that people from Lake Tahoe came down, and they're mostly Californians. Hence all the California license plates in the parking lot there. And they either don't know the rules are different in Nevada, or they're still really, really, really cautious. And I argue by the time they got into the store and realized about half the people are not wearing masks, that the rules were different there. But there was still caution. There was caution because that's what we've been living for that period of time. And perhaps they were looking at the Nevadan people going, how can you not be wearing a mask? So it's very, very much perception. Anyway, sorry I took off that subject a little bit, but it was a little thing to share there. Is there a formula for how much student loan debt one should take on? There actually is. This is something you can get from a good financial planner. I don't have the name of the person who sent this question, but if you are a client or a family member of a client, reach out to me. If you're not a client, you can still reach out to me and I'll try and help you too. But definitely if you're a client or a family member of a client. It's not hard and fast because a lot has to do with your own personal situation or what you expect your personal situation to be. But oftentimes, one of the parameters we use is expected earnings to debt load and time. And there's a kind of a little, but there is it's not too complicated. I'll share it with you. It's great for parents too, when they're looking at colleges with their kids and what the cost may be in scholarships and things like that. There is what we as financial planners consider a reasonable amount of debt for the job or for the degree that's being sought. Again, this is highly personal as well. There's a lot of variables that go into that, but it really helps with people that are really concerned or fearful about taking on debt, but need it in order to finish their education. So, long way of saying yes. Okay, Biden's tax plan, retroactive, that's what he said. Yeah, I talked about that one a bit earlier. It's talking points. We don't know yet, so I don't want to take too much more time talking about that one. If everyone is leaving California, why is the traffic getting worse and housing prices so high? And I know who wrote this. For what reasons I talked about earlier. Traffic's building because people are going back to work. It's simple as that. It's not like we built more roads when people were working remotely. People are going back to work. It's not everywhere yet. It'll be even worse, especially in the Silicon Valley region, when the tech companies start bringing people back to whatever degree they do. But yes, traffic is definitely picking up as people are returning to the workplace. Housing, we talked a bit about that earlier. Last year, people had an opportunity to rethink their lives, and a lot of them decide they want to live in different places. And they have the funds to do it, and this is what's driving pricing up. California is so far behind the mark on building housing for the demand that you could have a significant outflow of people leaving California, and it's still not going to meaningfully affect housing prices. I want to stress that. A significant, I forgot the number now, but we sort of modeled it out once, to a number that's unlikely to leave the state. We as economists that track migration around the US, we have not seen this level of migration of people moving out to different states, moving different areas. We haven't seen this since the Dust Bowl. It's like fascinating to watch how many people are moving around. And there's two numbers. There's moving around, and then people that have projected, based on surveys and studies, projected that they're going to move. Okay, so obviously projected doesn't mean it'll happen, but it's kind of an idea of what is expected in the future. So they use the surveys on expected moves. It's pretty significant, people moving around. Though I do feel sorry for anyone that moved from the Bay Area to the Central Valley, because it was like 109 degrees there this week. It's pretty hot. Let's see. Should I sell this year to avoid Biden's tax increases? That we don't know yet. We really, really don't know that. This is really important to do a financial plan, okay? Or talk to the person that you're working with that does your financial plan. There's not a name attached to this. I don't know who you are to answer specifically to you. It is something that you're really going to want to be talking about come the second half of this year if we don't yet have a tax plan. Because not much of anything can happen on the tax plan, and a lot of stuff can happen on the tax plan we don't know yet. And we have to keep an eye on California, but I doubt sincerely California is doing anything to taxes this year from a governor who's facing a recall has to sign off on it. So I don't expect anything to happen in California this year. It's just the federal, it's just Biden's plan, and it's premature to say what to do, but do be prepared. Do be prepared that may be something you want to consider depending on your plan. When will the Fed raise rates? We don't know. They're saying they're not going to do much of anything until 2023, or they're implying that they won't do much in 2023. But if they see enough sustained indicators of inflation, they'll probably act sooner. But something to keep in mind is there's a lot of stuff the Fed can do that has nothing to do with raising rates. They buy a tremendous amount of securities, taking them off the market. They can start to push those back into the market, right? They can start to slow down on buying mortgage-backed securities just by them not buying so much of the mortgage-backed security, mortgage debt. If they stop doing that or slow that down, if they stop doing it, rates will skyrocket. If they slow it down a bit, rates will start to rise naturally. This is one of many things at the Fed's disposal that they can do to help minimize inflation. It doesn't have to be rising rates. They're going to be very careful, and they're going to make sure the economy is truly working on its own. It's not this residual from an extraordinary amount of government stimulus. Okay, so what we watch for is what's transitional and what's permanent in the inflation realm. A lot of the inflation things may well start to subside or mitigate probably around the fall of this year into the winter. Okay, but there are things we're watching because they're a lot more sustained. For an example, if you're a company, if you have to raise the cost of your goods because costs are rising, you can easily adjust that down when your costs decline. Okay, when your material costs decline, you can start to charge less for your end product. Okay, same. With labor, it's not so easy. You can't hire somebody and give them a sign-on bonus and give them a higher wage than normal, and then say later, you know, I'm going to cut your pay by 20% because inflation is going away. You can't do that. You can't do that, obviously, right? So wage inflation tends to be much more sustained and much more long term. It's not as easily adjustable as inflation to goods, even a lot of services. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because if a company can keep their costs low, have wages rise, and be able to manage other costs, they still can get through it, especially if the same thing's happening to their competitors. So wage inflation on its own is not something that's negative, provided the companies can raise their costs or lower costs elsewhere to be able to manage it. And it depends very much on the industry to their ability to do that. And it also depends on how quickly people come back to the workforce. We're expecting on Friday's data that we're going to see a meaningful increase in employment, a decrease in unemployment numbers, but that's still going to be a long and slow haul back. Okay. This question is perfect because this very much falls into that question. It says, how will worker shortage affect prices and businesses and inflation? We cannot find workers even at 20% higher pay. I don't know who wrote this question, but it does really represent what we're saying. The number of workers entering the workforce will increase as the uncertainty around COVID and the topics I talked about earlier, as well as additional government stimulus, starts to go away. Until then, there's unlikely to be much that's going to drive people back sooner. And I don't really know about what's going to stop that, the wage increase or anything like that. It's too soon to say. But people coming back as that extended unemployment goes away and as more certainty provided. You think of it now, it's summer, so now school is less of an issue. The childcare is less of an issue because now people are pretty much coming into the same thing that would come in a normal year. The summer, the school's out. So really the extended unemployment is going to be the biggest thing. And that's kind of, again, at this point in most of the country, where states haven't repealed it, will be going on until September. So that's that. And I think there's some more here, just a moment. Okay. All right, so over here, my kids are starting to earn money and have questions about what to do. What are good resources? There's a lot of good resources out there. Unfortunately, there's no name attached to this one either. If you are a client and these are your kids or any family members, we'll talk to them. We have a whole program to help young people make good financial decisions. And when I say program, it's customized. We don't have like a program. We will talk to them because the greatest time to get in front of somebody is when they're young and they're starting out. And sometimes it's hard as parents to talk to them because they don't tend to listen to you in the same way they'll listen to other people. There's a lot of really great ideas for them to help give them the confidence in making good choices. So I would just say there's also some really, really good books. So if you don't want to send them over to talk to me, you just want some resources, do me a favor and just email me or whoever you got this question to on the team, respond back to them with your contact info, and I'll get you some good books on this. So if you want to take the lead, I'll give you the books. If not, more than happy to talk to them. Big thing with the young people is there's a lot more for them now to figure out at a younger age involving finances than there ever was when I was younger. I'm 52. All right, life was just not that complicated when I was 20 years old, 22 years old, 18 years old. It wasn't that complicated financially as it is now. There's a lot of things for them to see and a lot of things for them to consider, and they're hit with so much information, especially, virtually. It's important to give them some really good guidance. And ultimately, this all comes down to maintaining their freedom and their independence and how they're going to use their money wisely. So more than happy to help. Reach out to me and I'll definitely get that to you. My daughter is starting a family and wants to buy a home, but the prices are very high. Should she wait? Can I help by taking money from my retirement? Oh gosh, please talk to myself, someone on our team, or a financial professional on this subject. There's a lot of very specific to you answers to these questions. There's no general advice to this one. Taking money from your retirement could have very serious and potentially financially devastating consequences, taxes and otherwise. So please don't make that decision without talking to somebody. There are other ways you may be able to help her. And whether it makes sense for her to do it or not depends on a lot of factors that aren't in this question. So please, reach out to us again or to someone else. I never wanted this to come across as you have to talk to me, but do talk to someone very specifically about this and be cautious on that retirement side of things. Okay, last two. Is there a formula for how much student loan debt one should take on? Oh, sorry, I did answer that one. Sorry, I asked that one earlier. Yes, there's a specific formula. So I think I got all of them. So I have the final one here. If the Fed spends 1 trillion on infrastructure, home builders will be competing with the government for building materials, driving costs up. Is it likely new home prices will continue going up? Really good point. Really good point. Let me just throw a couple of things on the infrastructure plan that may not be widely known. Okay, there's huge amounts of government competing with private industry in that bill. I'm not saying it's intentional, and again, I want to be respectful that people have a lot of different viewpoints on this is not political by any means, and people have a lot of different viewpoints on how societies should be run. But there's a lot of stuff in his infrastructure plan that make me really nervous as an economist. A big one is, as this gentleman wrote in this message here, the government will now be competing with private business in many aspects, and it's not just in the infrastructure space, right? If the government is going to be building affordable housing, what does that do to other builders? What does that do for the resources available? Look at the skyrocketing price of lumber and of appliances and everything else. It's not like the government's going to grow more trees. In fact, if anything, they'll be cutting less of them down because of the environmental components to it, right? It's going to put more pressure on private businesses because they will be competing with the government. Another component is innovation, okay? And again, this may not pass. So I don't want to use this as a scary thing. And, it's just something that was proposed in there. The tax credits for buying electric vehicles. So California wants to have no more fossil fuel vehicles sold in 2030, I believe is the year. Okay, so a way to get more people to buy electric vehicles, which is seen as good for the environment, is to give tax incentives. Okay, reinvigorate those tax incentives at a state level. This is the federal government, federal level, to incentivize people to buy electric vehicles. But there's a little caveat to that, which is the subsidies only apply to companies that are using 100% union labor. So what does that do to your Teslas? What does it do to your startups like Fiskar? What does it do to the innovative companies that are not traditionally union outfits? So what you do is you put innovative companies that aren't maybe doing things in a traditional way, you put them in competition because the prices are going to be different, because the tax subsidies will be different. So again, I understand why people can have an opinion that that's a good thing, and I can understand why people have an opinion it's a bad thing. But economically, these types of things can be damaging and can be dangerous and really have some unintended consequences. So this needs to be fully and completely understood. I will be watching it closely because it's going to have a big impact on the markets and potentially on holdings, again, with this. So wanted to bring that one up. That was a really good question. So thank you for posting it. Something I would love to close with, if I may, spoke a little longer than I thought, is the importance of planning. The importance of planning around these things. It takes away that, that financial fear, right? That concern, the financial anxiety that so many people feel because they aren't sure if they're doing the right things, if they've saved enough money, all right? If their investments are the right ones, and they get chasing from one piece of information to the other, from optimism and you know, hey, everything's doing well, to complete fear, right? And it takes up so much energy from people, and it doesn't allow for the enjoyment of life and the abundance in life and your purpose in life and all the things that are so truly important. So I cannot stress enough, I am here to help in any way that I can for people to understand what's next, to take away the financial anxiety, the financial fear, the financial concerns. I know I'm primarily speaking to clients, and you already know this about me, but I am committed to helping others. I am committed to helping others. Even if they don't hire me, I will give them some of my time to get them started, because it's so hard for me when I see people not living to their fullest potential because of financial uncertainty or financial concerns or financial fear. It is not how much you have. It is how much you need to accomplish your goal. And there are many ways to accomplish abundance that transcends the dollars in your portfolio or your bank account. And it's not just you, it's for those you care about. So please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I will make myself available for the small things and the big things, but I'm committed to being in service. And there's going to be a lot going on. I'm going to continue to do these webinars monthly. It does not replace my availability to you and to the questions that you have. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. I am here to serve. I am here to help. And we're going to see what's going to be next as we progress into this year. We're going to start to do some live events if California allows and how California allows for it. So if you have any ideas of places to do it, ways to do it, things that would be fun, send me a message and we'll get going on that as well. So I'll talk to you in this forum within a month. In the meantime, reach out with questions. All right, bye for now. Okay. Yay!
So sorry I was late.
Oh, sorry, you'll have to figure out the front part of it, I guess.
Yeah.
The beginning part of it. I saw you slip in.